Hi, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. It's Saturday, April 20th, and today I'm doing an episode of Q&A. So I have a number of questions from readers, and actually this morning while meeting with a student, I had the chance to answer a question with a student that I have also received from readers. So it seems to be something that's on at least a few people's minds, but there's a lot of other questions I have too today. I have, I think, 4, maybe 5 questions. We'll see how we do. These are all sort of philosophical questions. I'm going to run through them first so you can hear what they are, see if you want to stick around and hear my responses to them or not, and then I'll go through each one. So the first question was just, I get this question from so many people, right? It's how do I handle this particular transit? So it could be any transit of a planet to like Saturn to a planet in your natal chart, or Jupiter through a certain house in your natal chart, or if something that's happening in the daily sky, like an eclipse, or people, and how do I handle this? And then sometimes I get the question in general, what is the best way that we can handle all the different planetary transits? So we're going to ask the general question today, how do I handle this transit? Then the second question is, why do you only use the 7 traditional planets? Well, first of all, I don't just use the traditional 7 planets, but a lot of the time I do. And I teach an entire year-long course in ancient Hellenistic astrology, which starts in June. And in that program, I use the traditional 7 for starters. So the question is kind of, why do traditional astrologers only use 7 planets? Is it really because they're anti-outer planets or anti-asteroids? What's the deal there? So I'm going to try to address that question about why traditional astrologers use only 7 planets, or at least why I do. And then the next question is, do you need the outer planets, or how do you use them? I've covered this before, but I seem to get the question all the time, so we'll talk about that. And then another question is, can anyone do astrology? Can anyone become good at astrology? Could anyone read charts for someone? What do you need, in other words, we might ask, to become an astrologer, to do good astrology? So I'm going to try to make this brief. We'll go through each response to each question. So first question, how do I handle this transit? For example, my student this morning, very similar situation. I'm in the midst of something, right? I'm going through something right now. How do I handle it? What do you tell, I get this question too, what do you tell people or clients when they're dealing with something, some planetary situation, how to deal with it? So I always say like this, you're not dealing with a planetary situation. Start there. Really, really simple. You're not dealing with a planetary situation. You're dealing with your life, right? You're first and foremost, you're just dealing with life. You're dealing with your life, right? You're dealing with the life that you're here to live. So that's it. You're not dealing with any planets, really, truly. So then how the natural question is like, well, you're an astrologer. Don't the planets have something to do with it? Here's how I personally think about them, and you can consider this for yourself. In ancient astrology, many astrologers said that the planets were signs, not causes. So when planets are signs, not causes, I've talked about this before, but we'll repeat. What does that mean? Well, here's one analogy that might help. Imagine that every time that you go to an astrological chart, you're actually going to a wishing pool. It's a very magical wishing pool. And it's a circle in stone. So it's a container. It's the water's inside this container. It's like a birth chart. It's a wheel. There's stuff contained inside of it. It's a circle. There's stuff inside of it. You look into the wishing well at any given point in your life, and the wishing well has this incredible ability to show you images that resemble what's happening in your life. They are not the same as what's happening in your life because they're allegorical or they're mythological. They're beautiful, intricate patterns. Sometimes they're very artistic and a little bit more abstract. Other times they're very concrete. They can be a very concrete sort of depiction of what's happening, almost as though it is what's happening, right? But never quite, because this is stuff that's happening on the surface of a pool, after all. So you're looking into this pool and you're seeing what's happening. This is what we're doing when we look at a birth chart. And when we're going through a transit, So for example, let's say you're going through a Saturn-Venus opposition, and it's a time in life where things are a little bit more austere or difficult or melancholic. Things you're doing some real maturing or some growth work, as we say, around Venus, around relationships, around love, around sexuality, around beauty, around women. This is what's happening in your life, right? But all the language that we use to talk about what's happening in our life through astrology is really just our descriptions of what we are seeing in the pool. So when we say, I'm going through a Venus-Saturn opposition, just imagine that you're sitting around the edge of the pool with others who also are sitting and looking into the pool, and they're looking at their own charts, their own life situations reflected in all different kinds of images in the pool. And you're saying like, oh, right now I'm going through a Venus-Saturn opposition. What does that mean, right? Well, for the people who are sitting around the pool, they know, because the language that we're using in astrology is the language that we use to describe what's happening in the pool. But the images that are actually happening vis-a-vis the language are also different from the language itself. So I might be saying I'm having a Venus-Saturn opposition, but that's a technical piece of craft language that we might use to talk about the images in the pool that are being shown to us. And it's a common language. So everyone who hears that, who also is looking into the pool, like knows what you're looking at. They're like, oh yeah, Venus-Saturn opposition. Okay, I know what that's all about. I know what images, something like the images you might be seeing, right? So we have a shared language of astrology that we use to talk about what we're seeing in the pool. But the language that we use to describe what's happening in astrology is still language that we use to describe images that we're seeing in the pool. The planets facilitate the visualization of our lives through omens, through signs, through images, through pictures. So it's like you're looking in this pool and you're going through something, and what you're seeing when you talk about a transit is you're using a common language to describe images and vivid allegorical pictures of your life that is reflected in this pool. So hopefully that makes sense. Is this pool your life? No, it's not your life. Is the language that you're using to describe the things that you're seeing in the pool your life? No, it's not your life, right? It's a part of your life. Like it's a, in a sense, you're going to the well and you're using the language, so it's part of your life. But it's not your life itself. There's a difference between the language that you're using and the images in the pool and the actual experiences that you're having that those images relate to. Planets are signs, not causes. So now, that being said, the images in the pool that you're seeing are also not causing the things to happen. It's a magical pool that simply has the ability to reflect what is happening. And a language that you can use, shared language, to describe to others, to look into. You could go, and if you're an astrologer, you bring other people to the pool. They don't really know the language. And so what you're helping them do is learn how to see into the pool. And you have the language to be able to help them see into the pool. And then you give them that experience of seeing what's going on, and they go, oh, wow. That's what's happening in my life right now, right? And then they go back to living their life. And, and then for most people, the language doesn't follow them into their life. The images in the pool may follow them for a while and be very instructive, may give them a deeper reflective sense of what's going on, and may help them separate. Because they've had a reflective glimpse in a pool, it can help them separate from being overly identified with what's happening, which can help them make more intelligent decisions about how to walk through their life events that are unfolding. But they are not the images, and their life is not the images, and their life is not the language, right? So if you can follow all of this, this is the first thing that I try to impart to my students and to people in general when thinking about how to navigate a transit. It's your life. You're navigating your life, right? So how do you navigate your life? Well, usually the wisdom that's not necessarily found within the pool or the language that describes things in the pool are applicable, like kindness, compassion, trying to be healthy, trying to give yourself the right kind of nourishment, cultivating intelligence in life, doing the best you can, loving, forgiving. These are the things that are going to help you get through. Do you know what I mean? And it's no guarantee that those things will get you something or will avoid something. But those are the things that you do in order to navigate life. And in order for people to have those qualities available to navigate life, usually some cultivation is needed, some kind of spiritual practice. But you're not, again, just to make it really clear, when people say, how do I navigate this transit? A lot of the times what they're saying is, I'm misidentifying myself with the images and the language and then thinking that I have to somehow toy around with them in order to get something or change something or whatever. So you have a lot of people that get into astrology that start living their lives sitting on the edge of that pool, living their lives becoming more and more entrained to the language of describing what's in that pool. And they don't know how to walk away from it, walk away from the oracular temple and go live their life. You don't live your life at the oracle. Do you know what I mean? Unless you're a diviner. Diviners, they sleep in the temple, so to speak. They take care of the wishing well. You know what I mean? But very few of us are actually diviners. That's not how most of us spend our full-time jobs. So this will tie back into, can anyone practice astrology? A few people, I'll say this in advance, few people are called to be sitting at the edge of the well all the time, because in order to do so, in order to be really good at doing so, you have to be able to understand the difference between the well, the language that's used to describe the mystical images in the well, and everything else. You have to be able to differentiate between the language and realm of omens and what's happening in this mystical pool and life outside of it. The differentiation is key in order to be able to guide someone in and out of that experience. So when we're thinking about how to navigate a Saturn transit, go back to the Saturn-Venus transit for a moment. Someone says, how do I navigate this? Well, like, let's say it's a difficult time in life for love or whatever. Well, on a certain level, it's a difficult time in life for love simply because that's what is, because that's your karma. That's the way that the universe is flowing, and it's flowing through you, and it's flowing through your experiences, and it's blossoming these flowers. And in the pool, we use the language, we call it a Saturn-Venus time, whatever. But the first thing that really, really helps to help us navigate a transit or deal with a transit is to realize, like, I'm not the transit. The transit is not me. Like, the transit is like this beautiful allegorical picture of what's happening. So first, I just need to live my life. And second, I also need to understand that the life that I'm living is bigger than me. It's not all in my control. Right? So when a Saturn-Venus season is happening and astrology gives us a picture and some language to put around that, it's also like telling us, like, it's autumn in your love life right now, like it's the summer in your love life, or that there are seasons for things, and they flow through each one of us and our individual destiny paths in very mysterious ways. Even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that karma is incredibly mysterious and complicated, and like nobody can really understand it. So when something's coming through your life, the first thing is to realize that you're not a planetary transit, right? You're not the language of astrology. You are not your birth chart, those kinds of things. To just live your life, and to understand that astrology is giving you the relief of knowing that because you're a material being on a certain level, because we're in a material universe, just like, the weather changes, like your life is going to, like, forces of material nature, the Tao is going to flow through you and express itself in your life by flowering up in all different kinds of experiences and seasons. They're somewhat predictable, in fact, because the material universe operates according to revolving cyclical laws. So the gift of going to the wishing pool and being able to see the season that you're in is the gift to go back, live your life, knowing what season you're in, which can help you not get lost in it, right? Not get overly identified and trapped by it. You can think, yes, I'm just like you have a reflective relationship to what's happening because the wishing pool gave you a reflective understanding of what's happening. Through that reflective understanding, you can come to know the nature of the mind, which is a reflector. And then you can come to see what's actually reflected in the mind, which is your true self. So that's a really sort of philosophical explanation, but on a simple level, that's my answer. How do you handle this transit? Remember that you're not the transit. You're not the language describing the transit. Go live your life and use the reflective images of astrology to understand that this is a season that you're in. Now, the other thing that goes along with this is the idea of music. Remember that ancient astrology had inherently a musical paradigm behind it. So it's not just, well, you're in a Saturn Venus transit and like, oh, that's bad karma or that's good karma or whatever. And because you did things in the past or whatever, like a lot of that gets really heady. There is truth, of course, to the idea of personal karma being behind the way in which the different seasons of our life manifest. But how do we find some sense of attunement to what's happening, right? Like you can only live a portion of your life so much from some sort of dissociated reflective distance. We're not just saying like, well, just dissociate from your experiences and be like, well, that's not me. It's just a karmic season. Like that's not easy to do. And it's not really healthy to do either. So we have to take this reflective distance and marry it to a musical paradigm. So the musical paradigm goes like basically like this, like everything that's happening, that's unfolding in your life through the forces of material nature that are, you make material choices, they have reactions, and then they create karma, and then these seasons of karma play out, and then we're just doing this lifetime to lifetime, right? But everything in the universe is inherently rhythmic, right? So there's like a universal metronome going, and everything is unfolding in a rhythm. That's why we have rhythms all around us. So all of our choices that we make and all of the resulting karmic seasons that we go through are still being kept in a rhythm. So astrology is not just giving us reflective distance, it's also helping us to understand that everything is a part of a rhythm. And when we start to understand that there's art and an aesthetic and beauty and goodness and rhythm and like that to everything that we're going through, then when we go through a Saturn-Venus season of our life, the question is not so much about how do I get something out of this or how do I avoid something, but it's rather how do I understand the music of this season of my life? And then the reflective distance that we're talking about is not a dissociative experience, it's rather a participatory and musical experience. So when you're in a Saturn-Venus season, the question becomes, how do I enter into the music of this experience of life? Even if it gets dark and heavy, even if it's about loss, even if it's about betrayal, even, like these things. Our spiritual practice of astrology, wed to other spiritual practices, are about remembering to keep the beat, to go along with it. And what happens when you learn how to keep the beat, and astrology is teaching us how to do that, to give us a reflective understanding of our life that helps us also recognize the beat and the orderedness of nature, the beauty that fills it, then the experiences become filled with a spiritual dimension that transcends the good or bad. So Saturn Venus might be playing a really morose song in your life right now. It might be really heavy, right? But with astrology and with spiritual practice, because you recognize that there's a beat to it, then you can sink into it, right? Then you can enter into it. And the interior, you might say, of those experiences are filled with beauty and sadness and all different kinds of moods and emotions and feelings and images, and right, and but they are all transcendental, right? You can experience within this deep, heavy Saturn Venus song, it's like sad song, you can experience complete bliss. You can, the moods are multidimensional when you start entering into them. So the point of astrology, a lot of the times I tell people, don't go try to approach a transit from the standpoint of how can I change it? How can I sort of jimmy rig it to get something out of it or avoid something? How do I make the most of it? Is it an opportunity? What about my Saturn Venus transit? All of this stuff. It's like someone who is trying to play a beat on a drum to play along with the universe, right? But they can't get past the technical part of the playing, because eventually what you need is for the sort of technical and structured part of music to facilitate opening you into a deeper experience. So eventually the drum becomes automatic. And once it becomes automatic, and you're not struggling with the beat, you're not struggling thinking about trying to keep the beat, then your consciousness opens up and you move into samadhi, absorption, trance. You move into it. And within the experience, as this is still happening, in the exterior sense, the world, the cosmos is still keeping the beat. Saturn, Venus is unfolding in its particular way, and it will have a beginning and it will have an end, and there will be retrogrades, and it will, there's like an astronomy and a math to it, and it's keeping the beat. But you will have entered into it, because we learn how to entrain ourselves to the experiences, and then we enter into them. And when we do that from a space of especially training ourselves to be in devotion to source, to God, when we learn to recognize that the experience of the beat, the rhythm provider, the structure, as well as the entrance and absorption into the substance within, when we recognize that whole process is God, right? And that's when we come to share and commune in a space with the divine. And then it's not really about what comes out of your Venus-Saturn experience. It's not really what you make of it. It's not whether you get something or whether the relationship goes well or whether you capitalize on the opportunity and make really healthy growth steps. It's not about any of that. That would be like someone who just can't get past the part about, okay, wait, I'm thinking about the music, I'm thinking about the rhythm. Okay, I know there's a rhythm and there's a beat and I've got to keep it. And like, if you keep thinking like that while trying to play a musical instrument, you'll never get to the point where the playing is automatic, so that then something else can come through. The actual substance can fill the container. So I always tell people, let's go back and repeat. You're not the images in the pool. You're not the language that's used to describe the images. All of those are there to help you facilitate hearing and understanding the rhythm of your life. And then when you understand it and you take steps in your life to have spiritual practices, and astrology can certainly participate in that help you keep the rhythm, eventually it becomes automatic, right? And then you're in your life. That's the gift. That's the actual purpose of life. It doesn't have to do with what comes out of the Venus-Saturn experience. It's about entering into it, right? So that's a deep philosophical answer to like hundreds of questions that I get every year about how to handle this transit or how to handle that transit. This is really the answer about handling every transit, if that makes sense. Not that I'm any master of it, right? But this is actually what we're striving for. This is what we're trying to do. So the other thing that you can think about is, when you usually have two different experiences with music. If you go into a concert hall and some music is playing, you're going to have one of two experiences. You're either going to resonate with the music, which means that it fills you and sort of starts reverberating within you, right? Or you're going to feel dissonance. You're going to leave the concert hall, or try to leave, or struggle to leave, or you're going to fight with the thing that's trying to occupy and fill you. So similarly, in our lives, astrology, when we say ancient astrology and traditional astrologers say that we're into fate, well, all that we're saying is that there is a music playing through all of our lives, orchestrating the entire cosmos at once, and that's not in your control, right? Your freedom is not found in trying to fight against that, trying to control, be the controller. That's not where the freedom is located. Insofar as we think that's where freedom is located, then we have these illusory experiences in the realm of Maya, where we're fighting against the flow, right? And insofar as that's what we're doing, it's very painful. It's like music that we can't bear to hear. And then we get really in our heads and like, how do I manage this transit? And like, oh my God, I've got a Saturn Venus transit going on. And like, have you seen my chart? I've got like a crazy yacht and a kite and a Solomon seal. And like, my chart's really crazy. And like, I've got a bonkers chart, and all of that just bad, right? It's not helpful. So that, but when you come to see that everything is actually music, then instead of fighting with the music that's playing in the concert hall and trying to run out screaming or whatever, trying to like maybe I can get up there and somehow control the music and make it what I want, right? The process of in like evolving our consciousness, enlightening our consciousness, is being able to recognize what type of music is playing, what type of response we're having to the music, and to have some reflective capacity to recognize, right? And then to immerse ourselves to become resonant instruments of the music of the spheres. You have to remember that ancient astrology comes from, is deeply influenced by people like Plato and Eudoxus and Pythagoras, who were all, they were into both geometry and like math, but also music. And so in the Egyptian, mysticism is like this as well. So, and this is why, you know, astrology in India for a long time has also been wed to musical theory. So, and there's people who know a lot more about this than me, so I'm not trying to act like any professor here, but, you know, so when you think about planetary transits coming through, think about it in terms of your response. The real freedom lies in whether or not you can recognize with reflexivity what kind of music is playing and then enter into it, you know, choose to resonate with it, because otherwise it's dissonance. And when we choose to resonate with things, the beautiful thing that happens is, like, there might be a Pluto transit coming, you know, and Pluto's like, boom, boom, boom. It's like this very foreboding beat that's coming, right? But when you recognize that, it's like every beat is demanding something from us. It's demanding a mood. It's demanding a feeling. It's demanding a flavor. And so when we choose to resonate with that flavor that's coming through, then naturally we are filled with the intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, to know how to act and be a part of that flow in a way that is harmonious, clean, light, pure, good, beautiful, true. That even if it's Pluto, even if it's Saturn, even if it's Mars, we're given the natural instruction of what to do to play our part. You know what I mean? So you can't preemptively do that. That's like someone who's thinking too technically about the music, and they're like, well, I'm just trying to play the scale and I know my finger goes here and blah, blah, blah. Like, in the beginning, when we're learning, sure, we have to be, we're kind of focused on the technical parts because we don't know how to play along. But eventually, when we learn enough about the technical parts, they're there to facilitate absorption. They help us concentrate and focus so that we can enter in to absorption in the life experiences. And again, that's when we're doing that, then everything we need to know, everything that we need to do comes. It's not preemptive. It's not like, you know, people who sit down and try to give you instructions about how to handle a planetary transit aren't giving you real instructions. The best instruction is personal. It's so idiosyncratic. The cookbooks could do nothing for the most part, but betray the incredible confidence and beauty of what each planetary transit, how each planetary transit will guide you. And how you will become a servant of the unfolding of creation when you enter into things. The best instruction is, how can you develop lifestyle practices that teach you heartfelt absorption, trust, and surrender to God, to the universe, right? That's not easy. It's really, really difficult to find experiences like that, because you need consistent practice, consistent teachers, consistent community, you know. So it's not an easy thing, you know, to find. It's actually it's like one of the rarest things to find that in this world. So playing on this is the next question: why only 7 planets? So why only 7 planets? Because when people are learning how to play along, how to absorb themselves in something, the language of astrology is meant to help us learn how to absorb ourselves emotionally, spiritually, from the heart, mind, body, soul, in the experience of being here. And when we do that with a sense of wanting to be a servant for the divine, wanting to be an instrument of the divine, then even though karma is still going to play out in the world, selfish actions that try to separate itself from the music and then have to go and experience suffering outcomes as a result, that's cosmic justice. We're still going to have to participate in that. But the more that we get absorbed, the more that we don't sweat the burning off of that karma, and the universe starts taking over, the God starts taking over for the process of that karma getting burned off. We don't have to worry about it as much. It's not, you know what I mean? And that's also why it's important. Like, that's why we don't go and stay all the time at the wishing pool and stare into it and get really caught up in the language of how to describe things in the wishing pool, astrology and its language. Because when you do that, a lot of the times what you're doing is, again, it's like getting caught up in the technical pieces of the instrument rather than taking this experience and learning how to let it facilitate absorption into your life, right? So when club astrology takes over and we get overly absorbed in thinking about all my transits in my chart, or we obsess over it like that, that's not good. So back to why only 7 planets. Because when we have seven planets, for most people, is a simple place to start recognizing and understanding the basic rhythms of nature, the basic rhythms of karma. When you start simple with just 7 planets, you don't add in a million asteroids, a million minor aspects, a million, outer planets and all sorts of crazy stuff. What you start learning is the basic beats. This is Saturn. This is Mars. This is Venus. This is Moon, right? You start very simple. And because just like when you're learning to play your very elementary musical theory, like how do I count? Like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you might speed up a little bit, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Very, very simple. But think when I see my daughter, who's 3.5, learning how to clap like this, and the joy, the amazing joy, just in being able to keep the beat for the first time. It's so simple. But we think that it takes complexity on the front end in order to facilitate depth, diversity, and ecstasy of absorption. So we think if I jam like a bunch of stuff in, then that's what creates the multidimensionality. But no, actually, all a lot of like rhythm structures that are very simple. Like they're like keeping a 4-cycle beat, and then you can fill that beat with lots of different things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in a sense, when you're learning ancient astrology, you're learning very simple beats, but it's not the beat that matters. People are always like, well, ancient astrologers are stuffy. They're all about rules. No, a good ancient astrologer is about simple rules because they facilitate absorption more quickly. And when you start feeling and understanding what absorption looks like as an astrologer, what it feels like, and the kind of results it generates as an astrologer, then you start learning astrology. Because the thing that you're trying to do it's not how many planets you have. I mean, you can have lots. It's not that you can't. You can have lots of asteroids. You can have all of that. But if you don't know how to use whatever you have to facilitate absorption, in other words, if you don't know how to get entranced and totally absorbed in a simple beat, and you can't carry it well, how much chance do you have to carry a really elaborate beat with lots of stuff in it? Do you know what I mean? And a lot of the times in astrology, people start by learning really elaborate shit without starting at the foundation and learning very, very simple things, very simple chords, which then facilitate simple absorption. But true things come from simple absorption. If you can watch a 3-year-old have total ecstasy just from learning how to clap their hands in rhythm, understanding rhythm for the first time, watching them light up, that experience is lost on us as astrologers in modern astrology a lot of the time. So if astrology can't facilitate absorption on a simple level, a lot of the times I don't think that it's capable of facilitating at a high level. Instead, what you get is bad sounding musicians. You get people who try to play really elaborate things in charts, try to use really elaborate language, and it comes away not having facilitated absorption, but having facilitated a person entering into cliches. And then typically what happens as a result of that is everyone starts camping out at the wishing pool trying to get identified with it, right? And thinking that that's what's real. That, right? So that would be like thinking that, just the rhythm of the universe is all that's real. It's not what happens when you enter into the rhythm. It's just the rhythm. That's it. Same thing when people think, well, I am my chart, I am my transits. The only thing that's real is the astrological language, and then they just pepper it with as much as possible. Some people actually call this imaginative. They'll call this imaginative astrology. It's not imaginative at all, right? It's actually really, really impatient. It's lacking a real musical ear. So at any rate, anything simple can facilitate things that are incredibly complex and incredibly vast and multidimensional. So that's why I personally believe that using 7 planets, at least in the beginning when learning, is a really good idea, because you don't necessarily need a ton of things to create a deeply sophisticated experience. In other words, you don't need, although the asteroids, for example, often tell really beautiful mythic stories that aren't necessarily included in the names of the traditional planets. That doesn't mean that the mythology of lots of different characters in Greek myth can't be expressed within the use of the traditional 7 planets. So for example, sometimes people will think that they need Black Moon Lilith and their chart has a dark moon in it, right? Like you don't need Lilith if if you can talk about a dark moon. Lilith can be a part of your storytelling in a dark moon. There's a lot of things like that in astrology where we think, again, by cramming in more omens, by cramming in more signs, that I'm becoming more accurate. The idea is not to become more accurate, it's to become more absorbed. Once you're absorbed in anything, whether it's simple or apparently sophisticated, the inner experience, the absorption into the astrology, into your life, is what matters. If astrology, whether it's using something simple or complex, doesn't teach you how to be more deeply absorbed in your living experiences, that's not really doing its job. That being said, I see lots of people who use asteroids and outer planets and lots of things to facilitate absorption. I'm not saying it's not possible. I see it happening. But I personally believe that especially newer students of astrology can really benefit from learning how to be absorbed in simpler things, because it also facilitates learning to speak the language better, learning to be a better instrument, a better musical player, a better reader. So for me, it's like that's why. So I hope that addresses also, do you need the outer planet? It's not a question of need. Do you know what I mean? It's like, imagine this. Imagine that if the only thing that we're hoping for is emotional, heart-centered absorption, then does it matter if you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4? No, it does not. It does not matter. So that's why I say, do you need the outer planets isn't the right question to ask. Okay. Can anyone do astrology? No. Not everyone can do astrology, just like not everyone is equipped to learn how to play a musical instrument. Some people need astrology, and the fact that they need it is confused with thinking that they're supposed to do it. We need the language of astrology. Astrology is it's like very popular, right? Like everyone loves astrology. Like, so a lot of people anyway, really, actually more people than you would think actually really like astrology. They think it's interesting. They find it mystical. They find it, fascinating or whatever. When people then glom onto it, right? And then glom onto their charts and glom onto the language and da-da-da-da-da. What that's really talking about is the attraction that people have to learning a language that could help you facilitate some kind of musical absorption with your life. So the attraction is positive. It's good. That doesn't mean that everyone who likes it has the skill or the ability to learn how to sort of become fluent in the language and to become fluent at guiding people with the language into looking into their pool, right? A lot of people think that they can, and another thing that's I'm not crazy about is that a lot of people think, well, I can look into my own pool and just see it clearly. Like everyone knows their own birth chart. But actually it takes a very deep level of absorption into the language and experience of using the language to look into the pool, not just with yourself, but with many other people, to learn how to accurately describe what's in the pool. And so a lot of the times, even though there's nothing wrong with looking at your own birth chart, people really undervalue the importance of a competent astrologer in helping you see your birth chart accurately. That's something that I feel very strongly about. The other thing, not that you can't look at your own chart, though, I'm not saying that. So sometimes people think, just because people are interested in astrology, or just because people really need what astrology has, that they should become an astrologer, or that they can learn astrology and be like a really good astrologer or something. Or the other piece, like I just said, would be people thinking that, well, I've looked at my own birth chart. That makes me an expert of my birth chart. No, it doesn't. I can't be an expert of my own birth chart. I've been doing this full time, for 10 years. So I don't consider myself at all an expert of my own birth chart. So the other thing is that to learn how to speak astrology, you have to also, it's sort of like this. A lot of people think, well, I can't do astrology until I know like sort of technically or intellectually, like how it all works. And then I can go do it for people. And this would be like someone sitting down and saying, well, I can't, I hear this all the time in the yoga world. I can't do meditation because I'm not good at it. It's like, well, you have to practice meditation for a long time before you probably, it's just like anything, before you're going to get good at it. So you also have to be in a position where you are willing to put yourself out there and try to use the language to accurately describe what's in the pool. It's sort of like singing. Not everyone can sing, first of all. It's not everyone's karma to do astrology well. Because just like, again, it's very musical to be an astrologer. To be a good astrologer, you have to have some capacity to use the language and to generate within your client some reflective understanding or images of what's happening in their life. In order to facilitate that with the client, you have to be able to, in a sense, play the music of the spheres in this chart. It's kind of like you have a little flute and you're sitting on the edge of the wishing well. You have to be able to play it well enough, and there's technical, aspects to it, but you have to get beyond the technical components and play the music well enough so that it also facilitates an absorbing experience for the client, such that they then, they have a vision, they have things that stick with them. They then take that absorption or sort of a reflective musical experience, sort of a reflection on their own life that is musical in nature. They take that and they go back into their life. But you have to be able to facilitate that. Just not everyone can do that. And in order to do that, you also have to have a lot of experience. You have to get a lot of experience. And you also, so in the beginning, you can't act like you're a guru or like you're already a master flute player sitting on the edge of the well. You have to be very humble and gain as much experience as you can. In my first year of practicing astrology, having many teachers who impressed upon me similar things, I did 500 plus readings for people at no minimum donation just to get experience. You know what I mean? And I was living on, unemployment. I was collecting unemployment and barely earning any money and like totally scraping by, and just to get the experience. Now, I'm not saying I'm not trying to be like, oh, the school of hard knocks or something. I'm just saying it's not realistic to think that you can facilitate this kind of astrological experience for people, let alone for yourself, very easily. You need a lot of practice and experience to do it. The good thing about astrology is that as you study it and life goes on, life becomes a natural, there's always hindsight. You can always look back and say, well, these are the transits that were playing out, and this is what my experience was like. And then life naturally over time has a way of teaching astrology very nicely, because you can't help but be involved in the music of your own life. If you keep studying astrology and just keep living your life, you will get better at it. So astrology is sort of a guaranteed, something that anyone can learn on a certain level if you just keep living your life and keep reflecting upon it through the language of astrology. But to be able to facilitate it for others takes a lot of practice and a lot of staying power and working through frustration, just like, learning to play music would. But that's a metaphor for what we're all doing as souls with our lives. We're practicing, we're figuring out how to enter into the music. And it's not easy, because one of the most basic things that all ancient mystics tell us, including all the ancient astrologers, is that we are in many ways averse to not being in control of the music. We're averse in the sense of wanting to be separate from it, and we have a very hard time surrendering and becoming a part of it. So those are the questions that I got to today. How do I handle transits? Why only 7 planets? Do you need outer planets? Can anyone do astrology? So thank you guys for your questions. This was kind of a juicy philosophical discussion, but I hope it wasn't, too heady. Hopefully it sounded somewhat musical. And if you have any other questions, you can always email me at nightlightastrology@gmail.com. I hope you have a good one, and that this talk will inspire within you deeper musical appreciation for your life and for astrology. Okay, take care.